Welcome to the Wake the F Up podcast with Alix and Jamie, where we talk about living consciously and helping people uncover their essential self so they can stop sleepwalking through life. On this podcast, we're having raw conversations about difficult topics. Our goal is to create a safe space where our guests can talk about real problems and issues and how they decided to wake the F up and become mindfulness experts through their own emotional healing journey. Welcome back to Wake the F Up podcast. I'm your host, Alix, along with my co-host, Jamie. And this is part two of our conversation with my husband, David Long. He's our first male guest, and he's here with us to talk about grief, waking up, therapy, and everything that his healing journey has entailed. If you missed part one last week, I'd love for you to go back and listen to it. You'll get to hear so many great insights about societal expectations of masculinity and the importance of open communication in relationships.
And
What would someone have said about you before this interview if they had met you 10 years ago? Like a stranger.
100% sure they would have said that I was an asshole. 100%. 100%. That was always the first impression. And I went with that because it kept people at a distance and it kept them from telling me how they felt and asking me how I felt, which I was scared to death to tell. But I came from a house like a lot of people where telling people how you felt was not only not encouraged, it was actively discouraged. I mean, that was definitely not something that happened in our family.
Yeah.
And I think that's very, very common of that generation. And that's, I don't know if it's a World War II thing or what, but there's some like ancient trauma for that generation that's fantastically scared of their feelings.
For sure. So
And that,
if you were
that's
to,
really,
sorry.
no, go ahead.
So have you had discussions with other men about going to therapy, like opened up and told them?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Many, 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 many.
What
And
kind of responses do you get?
it's usually positive. But there's a reality of therapy as well, which is good, really good, open, available practitioners is not as widely available as you think. Now, I think it's improved with COVID.
They're
But
impossible.
yeah, they're hard to find. So, one of the things I love about this podcast and the app is that it's a mechanism to kind of dip your toe in without. Now, I don't mean to be pitching it, but the
Pitch away.
it's
Pitch,
a
yeah, I'll say pitch away.
it's a mechanism to dip your toe in that I might have explored. I would have never told Betsy, but I might have explored, particularly the meditations and stuff like that are a little bit less threatening. So I really have high hopes that and there's, I don't know. I also get this feed on my Facebook, and yeah, I'm 49, so I use Facebook. I'm not ashamed of that.
I always tell them, I'm like, that's your demographic.
I get this feed about the thing called
Mine too, actually.
there's this thing called man therapy. It's actually it's not an app. It's a collection of therapists that kind of promote therapy for men. And their little tagline is man therapy. Yeah. Breaking news. Men have feelings too. And it really is breaking news, honestly. I mean, for a lot of people, it's a shock. But yeah, I think a lot of the men my age, probably 10 years before, 10 years after, are much more open. And of course, that's kind of the ripe age for a man, right? That's when your coping strategies, when you were younger and no longer working, and you're probably still married to the same person and it's not working, and so I think necessity is definitely the driver of innovation, and I think people need to be connected. There's an innate need for people to be connected. I was so lonely before. I didn't even know how lonely I was. So lonely all the time. And there's nothing worse than being lonely with a full house.
Yeah.
It's a really terrible feeling. And it inundates everything with my kids, everything. Therapy has really, like, for example, one of the like aha moments with my therapist was I was really struggling. Actually, the main justification for me to go to therapy was I was really struggling with the kids. We were fighting a lot. Um, they just didn't seem to be participating in what I had concocted as a plan of survival. And so when I started talking to my therapist, she was like, she told me two things. Number one, um, why are you struggling with your children? I was like, well, they're not happy. They lost their mom. I can't make them happy. Spend all day, every day trying to make them happy, and I can't make them happy. And she told me, well, your kid's happiness is not your responsibility. And I was flabbergasted by that statement. It floored me. And I was like, are you sure? Because I've spent the prior 46 years really trying to provide them with happiness. And she said, well, how's it working out? And I was like, fuck, it's not working. It's not working. They're unhappy. I'm unhappy. I suck at making, and then that was my conclusion, was that I suck at making them happy. And she was like, no, you can't make them happy. Happiness is an individual choice. And what you can do is provide an environment and give them the opportunity to choose happiness. But at the end of the day, they have to choose it. And that literally blew my mind. And I have told people that, because people complain about their kids. They tell you, my kid bit this other kid at school, and um, or my kid is whatever.
We're going there
Yeah,
today.
the struggles with the kids. And I was like, well, what are you doing about it? And then they tell you what they're doing about it. You're like, so you really just want your kids to be happy, right? And then, yeah, I want my kids. Well, you got to let that go, because you can't make them happy. They have to make themselves happy. And that blew my mind. And then the other thing she told me in regards to the kids was, um, it seems so stupid to say it now, but she said, your kids lost their mom. For a long time, I thought I was the only one grieving, and it never dawned on me that um, not only were they grieving, but in a lot of ways was way worse than my grief. That my daughter told me once that when Alex and I started dating and I was happy, she told me that it wasn't fair, because I got to be happy with Alex, and that no matter what, she would never have a mom. So I really, I wasn't prepared to deal with their grief. I wasn't prepared to even accept the fact that they were grieving, and to accept the fact that it was different than my grief. Very, very different. I mean, they're so different. They're really unrelated. The parent kid bond and the spousal bond is very different.
Mhm.
And I had no concept of that. So I could go on and on with the things that Janice taught me, but those are two big ones that came like right in the beginning. And it immediately helped. It immediately helped. I stopped trying to make them happy, and one by one, they started choosing their own happiness and figuring out their way to be happy without their mom, which was really hard. It's still hard, but
Yeah.
it's a daily choice that we all make in this family. And anyway, I don't remember what the point was, but the point is that therapy can be. So I have shared those revelations with other people, and when I do, they hear it, they know, it makes sense, right? When I tell you, it makes sense, right? You've never lost a spouse, but it clicks because it's universal. It's a lot of these things that we talk about are universal. We just shove them down, but
Well, and grief is universal. People
grief is
often
universal.
one of my actually very best friends told me, "Well, I can't listen to your podcast really because, like I'm not really going through grief like that." And I had to really chew on that for a minute, and I was like, "Yeah, but yeah, you are." Like not everyone will lose their spouse, early, or not everyone will lose their family life or have these tragedies, but you will have a loss. And we are going through microcosms of losses every minute of every second of every day. Like our last podcast was so poignant to me because that was the most universal probably topic on grief we've gone through, which is fertility and the loss of the idea of something you really want but aren't able to have. So you lost your birth pictures, you lost those moments that you wanted. I lost being 30 and being able to have a baby in a normal family and being a mom who was in a normal 30 hustle. You know, everybody in the world has those losses and they are hurtful and painful and grieving, and the pain wears on you. And I recorded a awesome meditation today. I felt like literally some kind of external spirit was dropping in me about something that just literally like hit me inside the meditation, as though I swear, like if there is a higher power, it was coming through me in this meditation. Now it dawned on me in the meditation, the body is a vessel, which, Callie's always using her company as like vessel. And obviously there's this inner essence, and my sweet atheist husband and friends may not agree with me as I'm about to go down some woo-woo shit, but regardless, you just
I
let me
like the
take.
woo woo shit.
I would too. Well, it dawned on me that no matter what your thoughts are on afterlife, the body is just the external vessel, right? There is a deeper essence inside of us. And whether that's like of the divinity, like I believe it is, something that's untouchable, that's inside of us. It's so powerful. And when I'm thinking about grief for tomorrow, I freaking have COVID and have been having to quarantine away from my children for 5 days. And one of my children has it because we got it in New York, and one of my kids, my one who's struggling the most, does not have it. So I have not been able to hug her for 5 days. It's been challenging. And I've been in pain about that. And I think about pain today in this meditation. And I was thinking about this inner part of like the deepest pain I've felt. It weighs on my body, right? Like it weighs on my physical everything, cellular makeup. I can feel it. I can literally I can describe it as though it is a physical manifestation of what I've been through. And I think every listener has a pain in their life that's on them, in their vessel, marked on the cellular divinity within, right? But what I've learned in 5 years of grieving fucking hard, wide open, whatever that energy, deep divinity inside of us, there is a place deep inside if you're quiet enough and you can get there. And I feel like close my eyes to get this thought out because I have ADD. It is so powerful when you get to that place because nothing can touch you there. Right? That's the place where all the love and the light and that like positive energy will pull you out from death walk, will pull you away from suicide, will take you away to making the choice to love again. It's like that is the part of you that stays up all night with your sick baby in the NICU keeping you alive. There is something in us that will survive, and it's out of the body experiences. It's like I'm beyond the weakness and the external world feeling, and I tapped into that in this meditation, saying that like we can release the pain is held in the cells of our body, but there is a part of us so deep inside that it can scream out and choose life and healing. And I really, really believe that in my year 5 and in this marriage and in our company. And like I've been making these damn reels that take me 5 hours and like watching us run down this beach to create and what we've created. And it's like, well, yeah, we have $57 in our bank account potentially right now, but what we've created from nothing and from the belief is that spark inside, is that energy inside that is crying out that like I knew in honor of Carl, I had to make this help people. And every one of us inside of ourselves, you don't need per se a therapist. I think a therapist is such a mirror, and that's why it's important because it's really hard to know what you're seeing for a long time. My therapist helped me see myself and then quiet that brain voice that is always telling me I'm not good enough. And when I go deep down, drop in to that divinity, for my atheist friends, that like essential self, the truest you that's lovable everywhere, that's the part of you that can handle anything.
I just to go back to the
No, he's atheist. I'm interested to
this
hear how
is
he's gonna follow this.
apropos to your prior question about like how do you engage men in this process? And I
Don't say those kind of things.
and so I do think that
Yeah, he said, yeah.
the verbiage is important. Men tend to be very concrete thinkers, and we want to do A plus B equals C, maybe with a parentheses around A plus B, but that's about as complicated as it's going to get, you know? But I have learned in this journey over the last several years with Alex that with a mild amount of translation, it doesn't require hardly any imagination to translate it into man speak, if you will. She thinks and feels the exact same way I do all the time. And she says things all the time that I'm like, yeah, I totally get that. This is the way I would say it. And it's exactly the same thing. It's just with different words. Men generally are going to hear the moon package thing and be like, that's bullshit. You know, like for example, when we used to talk, Alex would say, you know, do you think that Carl and Betsy are watching over us and guiding us, right? I don't believe that personally, that they're like looking on us and stuff. But what I do believe in this absolute truth is that their influence is 100% there every second, every day. And that's really what you mean, right? People watching over you and maybe interacting with you, that's an influence, right? And you can call it they're, you know, in the clouds with their sandals and their bath towels, or,
Bath towels?
you know,
No biblical reference has
The
been.
or
sandals.
their bathrobes, whatever. And or you can say, yeah, you know, I feel their influence, and I do. I feel I've never met Carl, and do I feel his influence in my life and in this family every day.
So something I did want to say with Alex, I know the hoo-hoo stuff, but
Isn't a hoo-hoo your
okay,
vagina?
well, when I was in
Woo
connected
woo?
back to when I was doing in yoga training, I can't even remember like how the weekend went, but but we read The Untethered Soul, and they call it we are I think it's kind of the same thing of what you're saying. It's our individual spark, right? Because and this sounds so simple and it's like no shit Jamie statement, but when you really think about it, I don't know, it sticks with me and I think about it often just because I think about death often too, which whatever. Um but whenever somebody dies and it's not their body that you miss, like when they're laid in the bed and they pass away, it's not the body, it's the who it's the what their spark that you miss. It's what makes them them. And I know it sounds so no shit, but it is like
No,
if
I
you
know what
really
you're
think
saying.
about it, what is that's in them that you love so much and you miss so much? It's not their body. It's even for you to just say, "Oh, well, they were so funny. They always, they're always making jokes." It's their spark though, and it's hard to even put like a real word and definition to it
Well,
that
the
encompasses all of
essence
that.
of, yeah, who they are is encompassed in a vessel, and you do miss the physicality that's behind that, but the physicality of the body is matched with the
Yeah,
personality
it's
that's
it's not the body that you're losing.
that's
It's
right.
what makes that body different from the body next to it.
Well, I think it's important, no matter what your belief system are, is that we reminder that, like, we're hard on our bodies, right? We all are. We have to be a certain way, and it's just like our mind is never stopping with that. But like, I try to reframe that a lot in my teaching of Pilates and a lot of the work that we do is, and my daughter this morning being like, look at your body. You're not fat. Like, your body, look at all the life that this body is carrying you through. And then look, as I say this, I have to tell myself this a lot too, because I struggle like any other normal human. I am hard on myself and feel fat and need to work out more, and I shouldn't have eaten that. Like, I do the same diatribe that the rest of us do, because I feel like the voice of society and the voice of our mothers are often in our heads about our body image,
Oh,
or
yes.
whoever it was that was speaking to you at a young age, telling you you were supposed to be and you weren't quite there. But I do believe cancer journey and watching Carl lose his body in such a suffering way really got me to realize, like, we're really blessed. We're really blessed when we have the ability to move and the ability to breathe and the ability to eat and smell and love and hug and hold and stand up and drive, and like all these faculties that we just take for granted, you know? And That's the universal blessing that comes from loss. Like nobody wants anybody to love to go through what we've been through, but you when you do go through it, it forces an awakening in you to say like the most mundane things. I always say this, our holidays in our home are incredibly sad. They never are going to be what I want them to be, or the picture card that I used to actually have with like my first family. We were so naive. It was always like, the star was up, lights, presents, the dinner, singing the songs, and looking like a Norman Rockwell painting. But our everyday cards, coffees, little things like breathing, holding in the morning, I say this a lot. If everyone in the universe could start to look at the fragility of life, and you don't have to have had a big loss, you just have to watch anything crazy like that happen far away from you and say to yourself, like, what would it feel like if that happened to me? Like, what would I miss in my home, in my world that I've created? And how could I wake up today and honor the heart that's beating in my chest because I'm here for a reason and I'm alive and I get to choose my life, my happiness, my marriage,
I think for a lot of people, it's a very, very scary thought.
very scary.
Yeah, I think about it too often, and that's where I like try to, I don't know.
Then you have to
And
push it
I,
back.
but yeah, because then you start thinking, you're like, you start overthinking things too, and you're like, am I doing what, like, am I fulfilling myself, and
I think
what
that's why
makes
my best
me
friend
not?
can't listen too. She's like, I think she overthinks it. And it's like, and I don't mean go like rip your life apart and change your job. I mean like get up and step outside and let the sunshine hit your face and be like, it's a really nice day.
Yeah.
Smells good in my yard. My husband's nice. My son's actually
Something that
doing
I want
a
to
good job.
add to our app that I've been thinking about a lot this week from a yoga class I took recently is a gratitude chain exercise to just follow that chain all the way down. The dharma she used, that you got here to this mat, but not just being grateful that you're here at the mat, but are you grateful for the car that got you here? Or what about the gas in the car and the man who drove the gas truck to the gas station? To like do those little gratitude chains throughout your day. And I
That's
think that's
really
a,
cool.
Yeah,
a more
great.
positive way to look at it.
That would be a really nice little deal, I think.
And I believe in the power of our thoughts. I believe in the power of what gratitude can do. It really is.
Yeah, because the truth is that's where the fear chart ends,
Yeah,
right?
that I know. I
The fear
always bring up
chart
the
ends
ending.
right before you get to the gratitude part, right?
I always stop at the sad part. I guess that's the morbid in me.
And
Jamie's
that's why
like,
you got me.
"What the action steps?" I'm like, "Oh, all I needed was the." I mean, I think
We're
I'm
the yin and the yang.
generally like so emotionally welling up all the time. I'm just an emotionally deep person that I always feel sort of this mix between sadness and gratitude. That might be just who I am.
Yeah, I mean, and sometimes I remind you about it, and sometimes you remind me about it. It's nice
Yeah.
when you start pancake stacking, and I just remind you.
David calls my anxiety stack. So when I stack like 87 problems, a pancake stack.
Hmm. I've heard this before from
Yeah.
you.
So for the listeners out there, you might be suffering from your own pancake stack. I do that a lot. It always seems to actually, oddly enough, come at the same time of the month, if you know what I'm saying. And I stack 87 problems all at once. My life's a whole disaster. And then like 4 days later, I'm like, you know what? We're okay. It's
Gratitude
fine.
comes, right?
I think I stacked out on Jamie the other day.
But
She was like,
again, that's kind of back to, I keep going back to Untethered Soul book and what you said about inside of you, that divinity, but it's being the watcher or the listener of yourself
right.
Yeah,
and like watching yourself do your pancake stacks
yeah,
and identifying that and to just
yeah.
practice
That's
being
the
present.
wake up moment for everyone. You don't have to have a major tragedy in your life to wake up. So I want to stack in that meditation. I'm literally going to link it because that was literally what the whole meditation was. The divinity coming out of you. So the deeper part of you that knows, the knower, looking down at the body and watching the pain escape. That was like this whole meditation, which was so interesting because in true mindfulness, when we're like Eckhart Tolle, all of the things, being the watcher of yourself is the awakening. That's all it requires. It's not very complicated. It's very hard to practice, but it's not hard concept. Just watch yourself in moments when you're losing control, when your anxiety is out of control, when you're not being the partner you really want to be, and you're saying things that really you don't like, when you push your husband away and you really want to hug. Little kids do this all the time. Adults do this all the time too. You're like, go fuck yourself. You're actually really scared, sad, something else is wrong, and you just can't say it to the person and you just need a minute. Like, instead of being like, hey, I just need a minute because I'm so sad and I actually don't know what's wrong with me right now. And I'm about to lash on you. I'm gonna take 2 seconds and then I might need a hug. Like, why don't we just watch ourselves and say what we need? It's hard. But you can't say what you need until you watch yourself. You can't say what you need until you pay attention. And that requires stillness and taking a pause.
Yeah, I mean, even and this is like it's funny because we just had Jennifer on, but on Sunday I went to her class at Glow and it was packed. I mean, it was the most packed class I have ever been to in that studio. Probably the most packed class I've ever been to for yoga. And usually, as everyone knows, I don't like to be hugged and I don't like my bubble to be, involved with anyone else's bubble. But our mats were right on top of each other. We were like so close. And usually every fiber of me would say, "Oh, let me roll up the mat and get out of here." I stayed. And in her Dharma, it was all about being the watcher. And so to instead of looking around me, and at all these people, it was trying to take, like you were saying, outside of myself and look down on me and look down on my body. I was moving, but the exercise of having to do that, I don't know how to explain it, but it was powerful because it took away from the anxiety of being that close to other people. And I don't know, I don't even know where I was going with
Well, think
this.
about the brain pathways. When you go outside to look down, it almost takes away the chatter. So
Yeah.
it's a very Buddhist mentality. You're outside yourself, looking at yourself, so it takes the brain focal point back inside, but not in the head.
Well, and I think that's kind of the point. So that exercise is always, I think, kind of hard for people to maybe visualize and to actually participate in, but trying to do it through that whole 60-minute flow, and trust me, her classes are freaking kick ass. Like, you're hurting after in a good way. But having to do that exercise physically while moving, it almost impacted me more and it stuck with me longer. I felt like it applied. I don't know, I took it with me for much longer, and using that, I don't know if that could help someone else. If you have a hard time, anyone out there listening, actually understanding with what we're saying by being the watcher or the listener of yourself, it's a practice I would advise you
Very
to
much.
try. It was
And I
different.
would say David and I obviously share the same therapist. When we first met, he didn't have a therapist, so I shared mine with him. Um, that was the first. So Carl had just had big surgery. I was in hives from head to toe. I was in out of control. Okay. Just like, I can't describe any more out of control in my life I've ever felt than in that moment. I could not calm down, panic attacks. I weighed 105 pounds. I couldn't swallow. Like, I was out of control, had a breastfeeding baby. Just so many things were crazy and out of control in my life. And I think that's a massive, I have felt out of control well before cancer ever hit my world, internally, in the smallest ways that would make me ashamed, like, to admit to a person of cancer. So I want our listeners to know, like, you don't have to have a big thing, because I've felt that same similar out of control in many times in my life. I didn't recognize it then that it's the same until I got really pretty sick. But the thing that she told me was to practice that, just being the watcher, and being the watcher of how you feel. Like, how does my body feel?
Mhm.
What emotions are coming up? And that's enough. Just practice
Even
that.
meditation, if you can't meditate, because I
Yeah,
know a lot of people are like, "That's not for them," but if you could just quiet down and just pay
mhm,
attention to the thoughts that come into your mind,
that's
and
right.
that's all you have to do, and that's, like, such a simple little step that you can do when you're trying to go to sleep. I think that's probably when I most often
I think
practice
body
it.
sensations, like, is my stomach gurgling? Do I feel pain in my right thigh? Like, getting out of your head, not even the thoughts too, because, like, truth, when I was, like, in straight anxiety train, my thoughts were out of control, and they were like, I'm gonna die. It's not okay. Blah, how am I gonna live? Like, the crazy voice. But I think when you're like, what does my stomach feel like, and my legs, and you just, like, just the physical, That's step one. And when you can reconnect with your body, then you can go outside of the body and do this watching of the body, because I think you got to get in the body and then you can get out of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I get it. I was just trying to like think that's what I was trying to tie it out to is if one way is not working for you, here's another option. And David, we've totally got off of
We're
That's
on,
a
okay.
we're
tangent
on a
from you
train.
now.
Let's let David end on some
Yes,
kind of,
David,
I
you
don't
wrap us
know,
up. What is some
roundabout. He's very thoughtful. We
yes,
are very chatty.
It's okay.
close us out.
Um,
What do you want to tell the listeners about your healing, about your grief, about your life, about what you want them to know?
um, gosh, that's a big question.
Yeah, I don't ask small questions.
Um, I don't know. I mean, I hope that maybe one 40-year-old dude like me listens and thinks that this isn't weakness, that this is a better way. And I love the idea of breaking generational trauma. You know, I love that. I didn't even know that existed 3 years ago. Um, and I try really hard with my children to not continue the mistakes. But no, saying that, in times of stress, you go back to what you know, and you have to kind of be mindful that you don't go back there. And I think can be really hard for people that come from severe trauma, alcoholism, and child abuse and stuff like that. They can be hard for them to.
Do you feel like that was your ripple or your wake up moment?
Which one?
I mean, I think your wake up moment was after Betsy died,
Yeah, for sure.
that you needed help. But what is the glimmer? What is the brightest thing that's happened from you waking up, feeling and doing all this?
True love, for sure, for sure. I tell people that all the time that um, literally, I mean, within a month of me deciding to get help and to open my heart, Alex was there. It was crazy. I mean, I can't make any sense of it other than the fact that I wasn't ready to receive until I was ready. And when I was ready, she was there. Um, and I think she feels kind of the same way, that had we engaged in this relationship before, I'm not sure I would have been capable. Um, and not that we couldn't have grown together and probably been wonderful, but until I was ready, when I was ready, she was there. And I'm very, very thankful and grateful um, that I had the opportunity to love and have this crazy family that I love a lot, and something I would have never imagined, you know. Um,
Your bonus babies.
had someone told me 5 years ago, "Do you think it's possible to love someone else's kids?" I probably would have said no. But not only is it possible, it's amazing. It's remarkable. Because they don't have to love me. I'm just some dude that loves their mom, and I don't have to love them, but we love each other, and it's really, really special. It's like a choice, you know. In some ways, it's very different than your natural family. Natural family, and in a lot of ways, it's very special.
He put natural in quotations for listeners.
Yeah, because I don't know what that means. I mean, the family that I have now feels as natural as any family I've ever had or known.
Your birth family,
Yeah,
biological.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I think my kids feel kind of the same way, actually.
Yeah,
Um,
I do feel the same way about his kids. You know, when they choose me, like Kate called me and told me about college this week and all these, just my biggest hope for her as her mom figure, but not her mom, obviously. Like, but I am the female voice that she probably comes to at this point. And we talked about one of the things I felt like in her grief that was so challenging, and I didn't know her before her grief, so I only knew her in grief, was that I wanted her to love her body, love her life, and like unapologetically live in college. Like just she had worked so hard and she's such a smart and amazing person that I wanted her to have more fun. She was really serious. And I felt like David and Betsy were both, well, I don't know Betsy, I didn't know her very well, but
Pretty serious, yeah.
together they were pretty serious about like education and like all these things that are very important, right? Intellect is important, but I think they took intellectualizing, and this is some listeners who know them can yell at me. I might be wrong. I think they took at intellectualizing sometimes to be the place that held them back from having to feel. They would think out of it through intellectualizing. And I think,
Yeah, I would say we read instead of wrote,
and then when I met Kate, she was very similar to that. She wanted to intellectualize everything with me. And I just, although I really loved to intellectualize as well, and I like to read, for me, I intellectualize through my heart. Like I read everything and I think of it from an emotional perspective. That's just the person that I am. And I've always been that way. In my home, I was safe. Everyone was also intellectual. So my dad is like Mensa. My mom is very Mensa. Like it was a competition of who was the brightest and who was going to go to Harvard, like who was going to have the highest IQ. And I just early on learned I was never going to match in that game compared to my older siblings. And I went heart route every time. So I became an expert at feeling and feeling other people's feelings and whatever. So for Kate, I never wanted her to go to college and just spend her entire time only intellectualizing. I wanted her to be intelligent and I wanted her to I knew she was going to do a career in a beautiful way. But she called me this week and was like, I'm having so much fun and I've met all these beautiful friends and we've gone out every night and had the best time and I just couldn't help but choke up thinking like she's like I just could never have imagined it to go this well and for me to have this many friends this quickly and she went on a bad date and like all these things and I was just thinking like what an honor it is that I'm the person that's receiving these calls and I will always hold her mother in highest regard and know what an honor it is that I don't deserve to be sitting this seat. It's not her seat. It is a seat around the area where her seat would be. And it's a blessing when they choose you. And the fact that I get to be a voice of love and influence, I take really seriously. And I'm super proud of her. She's on a talk about this by patriarchy. She made a rocket building club that she applied to get in. She's going to build a rocket.
Oh my
Yeah,
god.
you heard me correctly. My stepdaughter is going to be putting a rocket into space.
That's amazing.
So don't worry, she hasn't lost her high intellect, but she's also having fun, which I think life is about balance. And
Love that. Well, I think
But
we definitely need to have David back.
oh my gosh, I know he's such a soulful man, and it's so awesome. Like I always want him to be a part of our app, and it's not because he's my husband. And you're always like it's nepotism. I'm like it's not
well,
nepotism. He's so
I
grounded.
never once said this, and I never once knew that
You
David wanted to be on the app. What are you talking about?
you said it was nepotism to invite him be on the retreats.
this is
Well, yeah,
definitely
that's
this is
different.
definitely one of the things that's on the list of shit I would have never done.
Oh
I
yeah,
would
100%.
I would have been like, hell, not just no, hell no.
But I
Okay,
love that about him, right? Like he is, and this is what men out there should hear. Like he would have been the quintessential guy to go for drinks and talk about sports and
Bullshit.
nothing.
Right.
Um,
Weather.
right.
He's talk about the weather a lot.
Yeah. Sports and weather. And like now he has a hard time, he can still talk about the weather. He loves the weather actually, but
I was about
you
to
have a
say, I
hard
feel like he
time.
was looking at the weather last time I was in town.
I
Loves
absolutely
the weather.
I love the things that Alex asked me to do. Um,
Not
ev-
initially.
yeah, even sometimes I'm like, no, but then I do it and I've never regretted it.
I made us go salsa dancing. So we're
Yeah,
on a trek.
exactly.
This will end on this funny because it would be funny instead of so heavy all the time. He's turning 50 in March. And so I've been making us do 50 things. I think I already talked about this, like joyful moments. He's struggling to like have play in his life. I think he's more serious than he is like playful. So we went to salsa class. What else have we done? That was a
Uh,
disaster.
we did that.
We
It
were
was
both
very
very
hard,
bad.
very hard. It was I told her it's a great reminder to do shit outside your comfort zone just to remind you that you are in fact not good at everything. The
Okay,
truth
so
is The truth is, as we age, we only do things that, we can kind of
like,
do,
and then
right?
we're gonna.
And that was way out.
I'm making it so you not only that, we thought we would dance just together. So that's like at least a comfort. You're like, fine, we'll just be
Yeah, we
terrible
can fuck
together.
up together, right?
They made you go every partner in the room.
Yeah,
So I danced that night with like 40 different men.
yeah, that was crazy.
Yeah.
It
That's
was
And there were
hilarious.
some fantastic salsa dancers in San Antonio.
It was a
that
lot
Okay,
of fun.
well, I want to end with us letting the listeners know that David's coming back on. So if you have questions that you would like to ask a male on how our advice or the man's thought process on therapy and waking up, I want to put it out there for the listeners to communicate with us. Let us know, please, please, please.
That's right. If you've
Also,
not downloaded our app, you need to. Stay tuned. We have an entire man emotional piece coming that's going to be really powerful. We are working on putting men on this because we want everyone, not men, not just females, but all people to be feeling.
And honestly, it really only works if,
Yeah.
kind of everybody's involved.
yeah.
Very, very Statue of Liberty poem feeling. No one can be free until we're all free.
Yeah.
I got COVID at Statue of Liberty, so that's why I'm so haggard right now.
Well, thank y'all for having me.
Okay.
Thank you for
Wish me luck on my 5th year death anniversary tomorrow. I'm going to be holding my babies tight, but I will say this to those of you who might be in deep grief, who might be in an acute tragedy that just happened, to those of you who are in long loss. I have found when you get to that inner essential part of yourself that I was referring to, deep inside of yourself, that part of you knows how to heal. And I really this year realized that I often get on here and talk about sadness because it's unavoidable that I am of sadness and of light. But this year, I am going to show everyone how unapologetically happy I am. And that does not mean I did not love my former husband. I did deeply love him, and David deeply loved Betsy, and we love our children. And we did not want bad things to happen. They just did. And in that choice, I just can tell you that healing, there's a lot of magic in it. So don't be afraid. It's more scary to hold back. Trust me, I've lived both ways.
Love that.
Okay, let's end our recording.
This has been the Wake the F Up podcast with Alix and Jamie, a podcast about normalizing and overcoming challenges like grief and fear. Be sure to check out our other episodes, where our community of experts share tools and ideas to help you wake to the life inside of you. If you enjoyed this episode of Wake the F Up, please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And join the Wake community by downloading our app. Just search for Wake Wellness in the Apple or Android App Store. And follow us on Instagram @TheWakeWellness. Thanks for listening. This podcast is produced by Caroline Pickens and the team at Fresh Picked Studio. For more information, go to freshpickedstudio.com.